Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review of Ruthless Gods by Emily A Duncan. This is the second book in the Something Dark and Holy series. The first book is Wicked Saints, so I'll link that review on the screen if you haven't read that first book. This was my Patreon VIP pick, so whenever I finish one VIP pick, I pick another one, and that is that everybody's name as a patron gets put into a poll, and one person gets picked to actually pick like any book for me to read. Off of my TBR, also just books that they want me to read, whatever, they get to pick. They have the ultimate power. So in addition to picking off of like the polls that I post, they also just get to like pick whatever. So this was my most recent VIP pick. So this jumps in a few months after the events of the first book. Seraphin and Nadia are kind of teamed up-ish together in Tranavia, and then Malachiash is like elsewhere after his villain breakdown. So if you haven't seen my Wicked Saints review, spoiler alert, it's gonna be a lot like this review because things that I hope to improve in this book like kind of did not, in my opinion. So first, I'm gonna talk about the world building. This world building is very similar to how I felt about Wicked Saints. This aesthetic of the whole series, top notch, peak goth. Having said that, there are trigger warnings in here for lots and lots of body horror, a lot of like gore, but more so I would say blood. But like if you are at all like about like anything body horror, blood, gore, there's also like a self-harm element here because there is blood magic that some people use in here, so there is regular self-harm. Then I would steer clear of this. Particularly if you're at all squicked out by eyes, there's a lot of eye stuff in here. So the goth aesthetic of this series is like peak. There is a lot of just like eldritch horror-ness. Like I said, a lot of body horror, just bones and blood and dark and goth and yeah. So the imagery and the mood and the atmosphere, peak. Sticks with you. Like even as disappointed as I was in elements of Wicked Saints, I still like felt that book months after I read it, and I will with this too. Like you can picture this book and the feeling of the series so clearly. But next I'm gonna talk about our characters. So very similar to how I felt in the first book, honestly, with everybody. So the thing about the characters and about the writing in general is that I feel Emily Duncan does individual scenes with characters so well. It's almost like fan fiction one-shots in that way. She does those beautifully, these individual scenes, but there's nothing really to string them together in my opinion. Like we will get these wonderful scenes, but you're like, well, what led to that? What are all these moments? You'll have characters like describing each other and you're like, where did you form that bond? How do you know that about each other? Where did this friendship come from? Like you don't get to see it, you're just told a lot. And that's just part of the writing style throughout, plot-wise and character-wise. And I said this in Wicked Saints as well. There's a lot of telling instead of showing. So there are these moments, these like wonderful scenes that I really like in theory and the mood that they bring and everything, but the actual like content of it just feels lacking. I have most of the same complaints about this book as I had about the first book with the characters and the descriptions of each other. Nadia's pull towards Malachiash is like, I still don't get it. We get more scenes in here with them, but even those like don't quite make a ton of sense to me. A lot of the plot is really forming around their relationship and things like that, and you just don't get to see a ton of it. You get these individual scenes, but you don't feel the impact of time. Character choices don't make a lot of sense to me, not just because of like me not agreeing with their choices necessarily, but just because like I don't see how they're coming to certain conclusions. I don't see how they make their decisions. Like things just aren't cohesively strung together in a way that makes a lot of sense. Also, I will say I expected this book to be gayer. I follow Emily Duncan on Twitter, and she was talking about how most of the characters in here are gay. True, however, like I wanted like more from that. Like there are some side relationships there that I'm like, okay, yes, that doesn't have to be a main plot point by any means, but what was being talked about like in sort of like the fandom and Twitter, I'm like, your fandom reaction to this is making me think that there's more gay content in here than there actually is. So then now you're disappointing me because I thought there was gonna be way more. So lastly, I'm gonna talk about the plot. Like I've already kind of mentioned, like there's a lot of things that just they don't make sense. There's a lot of things that are like not strung together in a way that makes a lot of sense as far as character interactions. There's a lot of things that like we don't get answers to, and at this point in the story, I feel like we should have some more answers than we did. Like I have more questions than I have answers. I don't know if I got anything answered in the second book, and like some things should have been answered in the second book, you know? Like I don't need everything left for the third book. And at this point I'm like, am I gonna get answers in the third book? So yeah, there's just a lot of things that I'm like, is this gonna get answered, or is this just for aesthetics? Like there's a lot of things that I'm like, are we just doing this for how this looks? Like it doesn't, doesn't make sense to me. So this was sadly not really disappointing because I went into this with lowered expectations than I did Wicked Saints because of how I felt about Wicked Saints, but I'm still just like, boo, I wanted more out of you than I got, again, sadly. But I will still finish this series. Like, I do like the vibes of it, and I'm like interested enough to continue, but I'm still like mad at it for not giving me more because it has such potential and I don't feel like it lives up to it. So I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, similar to my review for the first book. I will be doing a spoilery discussion of this to kind of be like, what are your thoughts about these things we don't get answers to? So I'll link that on the screen. So comment below and let me know your thoughts on Ruthless Gods. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.